Hello, and welcome to Hypnotic Kicks channel. Sadly, on 29 of December of 2022, Edson Arantes do Nascimento, also known as King Pele, has left us. This day is probably the saddest day ever to football fans because Pele is considered by many to be the best football player of all time. In this video I will try to explain why in my opinion he is the GOAT, the greatest of all time in football. But before you go on curse me and say, Messi is the GOAT or Cristiano Ronaldo is the true GOAT or something like this, I just want to say that this is okay, and I totally respect all opinions, and in this video I will just try to explain what made Pele so special and such an unique figure. The vast majority of people who saw him play say that without a doubt Pele was the greatest player of all time, and that no one has equaled him. Unfortunately, in recent years, some people who probably never saw Pele playing tried to minimize the king's achievements, saying false or unsubstantiated arguments, such as that Pele only played against horrible players, that the defenses were horrible in the past, that the goalkeepers were terrible, and that he only scored goals in friendlies. Or that he wasn't that good because he didn't play in Europe. Well, first of all, Pele scored 1.283 goals throughout his career, playing for Santos Brazil and for Cosmos. None player have such a mark. If you think that we saw players like Messi, Henry, Rooney or both Ronaldo scoring lots and lots of goals in the last years, but still none has ever reached Pele's numbers. Also, Pele had an incredible mark of goals in his early days. Just for comparison, with 21 years old, Eto'o had 25 goals, Henry had 31 goals, Suarez had 35 goals, Cristiano Ronaldo had 36 goals, Lewandowski had 41 goals, Messi had 51 goals, Rivaldo had 54 goals, Karim Benzema had 62 goals, Rooney had 66, Owen had 76, Romario had 82, Agüero had 84, Raul had 91, Haaland had 115, Mbappe had 116, Neymar had 140. Maradona had 155 and Ronaldo Nazario had 167. But Pele had 479 goals already with just 21 years old. Some people say it was easier for Pele at that time. There are people on the internet that say Pele only played against weak players. Pele, with Santos or Brazil, played against Garrincha, Zizinho, Puskas, Di Stefano, Didi, Bobby Charlton, Copa, Fontaine, Eusebio, Tostão, Gerson, Revellino, Jairzinho, Cruyff, Neeskens, Gerard Muller, just to say a few. For those who say that the defenders and goalkeepers were bad, Pele played against the names of Gilmer, Yashin, Gordon Banks, Mazurkiewicz, Carlos Alberto Torres, Moro, Nilton Santos, Bobby Moore, Beckenbauer and scored against all of them. Even Franz Beckenbauer said that Pele is the best of all time. Puskas once said that he refused to classify Pele as a player. He's above everyone. So you say Pele played against bad players, you are disrespecting all the names I said before. In the time of Pele, the balls and boots were made of real leather, and they were rough, heavy and with wet grass, they gained twice the initial weight. The shirts were made of a mesh that accumulated sweat and also weighed, as if each player carried a teammate on his back. Imagine the difference it made in headers, in the amount of effort to take off. In Pele's time, there was no internet like today. Everyone entered the field against opponents they had never seen play. No striker knew anything about the man who would mark him. Would have to find out during the match. Today all teams already have scouts and analyzes of all teams, but in the past it was not like that. Today some people that the amount of goals of Pele shouldn't count, only the ones in official matches. This is something difficult to explain to a younger generation because nowadays we argue about which player has more Ballon d'Or or which one have more Champions Leagues. The reality of football changed a lot. First, in the time Pele played there wasn't a trophy for the best player of the world and the best player of the year. Also, football didn't have so much money involved. In fact, players earned way less money than players gain today. And for the clubs, at the time that there was no internet and no merchandising and products to sell, the best way to make money was making friendly matches with other teams. So, at that time, the players played a friendly like it was a Champions League final because if the club won the match, it would mean more prestige and more friendlies invitations and therefore more money for the clubs and for the players. At that time Santos Football Club traveled around the world to make a lot of friendlies in order to make money to maintain their massive squad. Still, some people say that Pele can't be considered to be the best because he didn't play in Europe. In fact, that's not true because Santos did lots of games around the world and many games in Europe, playing against the best teams of the world. Just for example, in Germany, Santos played against Bayern München, Borussia Dortmund, Hertha Berlin, Schalke 04, Stuttgart and many more, and even against the national squad of Germany. In Spain Santos played against Real Madrid, Barcelona, Sevilla, Athletic Madrid and Athletic Bilbao and many more. In Italy Santos played against Internazionale, Juventus, Milan, Rome, Lazio, Napoli and many others. In England he played against Chelsea, Aston Villa, Newcastle, Everton, and many more. In fact, many of the 1.283 goals Pelé scored were against European clubs, so you say Pelé goals shouldn't count, or that he didn't play against good players, you are disrespecting all the clubs I mentioned above and countless others that I didn't mention. Many people know that Pelé have a lot of individual records, like still been the only player to win 3 World Cups. We could talk about the numbers of Pelé all day long. But it's not just the numbers, records and titles that made Pelé special. For example, Pelé is one of the few players that have his missed goals as famous as his goals. For example, the goal that Pelé almost scored from midfield, or the goal that he almost scored dribbling the goalkeeper without touching the ball, both from the 1970 World Cup in Mexico, are famous moves that are remembered until today and can be seen in almost all highlights videos about Pelé. Also, if you ask many football experts what was the best save of a goalkeeper ever, mostly will say it was the Gordon Banks save against Pelé header also in the 1970 World Cup. By the way, we can see some of Pelé's goals and skills, but mostly are from bad cameras and in black and white due to the technology at that time. And even though there were lots of things we can see of Pelé, don't forget that only around 30% of Pelé games were filmed. This means that around 70% of Pelé's magical career is lost and can't be reviewed, and only the spectators of that games were able to witness the football of the king in those matches. Let's not forget that at that time there was no VAR and no television to show replays from many angles, so football was much harder because the defensive players hit the others very hard. If a referee wanted to let a player get foul after foul until he gets injured, that was nothing that could be done. In the 1966 World Cup, the players hit Pelé until he got injured. Without Pelé, Brazil got eliminated from that World Cup, and that was the only World Cup that Pelé played and did not win. If you search YouTube, you can see a lot of videos of Pelé getting hurt from consistently receiving fouls from their opponents. In the beginning of Pelé's career, there was no yellow and red cards. So there was no way to make players stop making fouls. Pelé is also such an unique figure due to all the backstory behind him. According to some studies and researches, Pelé once was the most famous person in the world, just behind Jesus Christ. Pelé is probably the most famous Brazilian of all time. In football, if the Brazilian players are respected today, and we saw many Brazilian players gracing the sport, like Neymar, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Kaká, Cafu, Roberto Carlos, Robinho, Romario, Zé Roberto, Adriano, and many more, it's because Pelé opened the path for them. Brazil is the biggest world champions with 5 titles, and 3 were with Pelé. But probably the most difficult World Cup for Brazil was the first one, in 1958, because no one expected Brazil to win. They were not long the favorites and didn't have a legacy in the game yet. But Brazil managed to win their first World Cup due to a young talent that was just 17 years old at that time called Pelé. After that, Brazil became well known in the game and respected. And Pelé became a celebrity all around the world. Some years later, after winning more titles and proving his skills year after year, that people started calling him the king of football. He became such a celebrity that everyone wanted to see him. There's one famous photo taken in Mexico streets featuring a poster saying, "Today we are not going to work because we are going to see Pelé." As I said earlier, it's hard to compare with today, but even in a Champions League final, we can't imagine people stopping their work and their jobs to see a football match, but at that time people stopped everything just to see Santos and Pelé playing football. Pelé was such a celebrity that even presidents and kings wanted to meet Pelé, take a picture with him and watch him play. In 1968, the Queen Elizabeth II was invited and came to Maracana Stadium in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil just to see King Pele play. After the game, the Queen said that Pelé was incomparable. Another great story is that Pelé once featured in a movie called Victory from 1981 that featured other great actors like Sylvester Stallone and Michael Caine. In an interview, when Stallone was once asked about Pelé and that movie, he said, "So Pelé was there and I had already heard about him and said, I'm going to play as a goalkeeper." He replied, "Really? Have you ever done that?" I said no, and he warned me, "You stay here in the goal, I'm going to kick the ball and you won't be able to do anything about it." I thought it was silly. On the second kick, I managed to get my hand on the ball and heard a crack. It slipped through my hand, broke my finger, tore the net and knocked over the wire tents. I could only revere. But probably the most famous story about Pelé was that he stopped a war in 1969. Pelé said himself that this was the story that he was most proud of. The truth is that at that time Africa was a continent on fire. Many countries had recently become independent and were disputing power and territories. This was the scenario that the Santos team encountered on the trips they made to play on the African continent. What happened is that Santos was supposed to play in Nigeria, but they were having a civil war at that time. But when Santos arrived, a ceasefire was agreed in order to have Santos Football Club playing there, and the Nigeria authorities could greet the players. This story was told countless times, but unfortunately some historians said that the story is not exactly like that, but for the people from Santos squad that are alive until today, they swear it is true. One of them once said, "I know what happened, they stopped fighting because everyone wanted to see the Santos game." As soon as we were leaving and the plane was taking off, we heard gunshots. I don't care what other people say, I was there and I saw everything with my own eyes. According to the people who saw Pele playing, he was so good that he could play in every position. Many people who don't know Pele think that because he scored so many goals, Pele played as a striker. But in fact, Pele was a playmaker or an advanced midfielder. The striker of Santos' team at that time was the other legendary player Coutinho, who played as number 9 in Santos. In Europe most people know just Philip Coutinho, but in Brazil, many people say that the Santos Coutinho was the real Coutinho because he is considered to be also one of the greatest players of all time. Another fun story is that Coutinho was physically similar to Pele, especially watching from the stadium, and sometimes when Coutinho scored a great goal, people would say it was from Pele and not from Coutinho, and that used to make him angry. He once said, "Pele scores lots and lots of goals already, and when I score people still thought it was him, that was not fair." But one thing that many people didn't know is that Pele played in every position possible, including the goalkeeper. Yes, you heard it right. Pele was good even as a goalkeeper. And in a few matches for Santos, all the goalkeepers were injured, and Pele was chosen to play as the goalkeeper and didn't concede a goal. If you search the web you can find pictures of Pele playing as goalkeeper. In fact, the newspaper at that time said that Pele helped the team by doing some 5 saves that were difficult for someone who's not a professional goalkeeper. So with all that, I hope I helped you understand the importance of Pele to football. Pele is probably the most legendary player that ever graced a sport. Many people call football the beautiful game today, and that started because when Pele played people would say it was an spectacle, it was an art in its absolute form. Now, if you think that Pele was not the greatest player of all time because it was Maradona or Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo or other player, that's okay. This video was not to convince you. I think everyone should have the right to have their opinion freely, and it should be respected. The idea of this video was just to make a small tribute to Pele because he was very important to my country and to the team that I support, and of course, for football. He changed the game, he was ingenious that only appears once in a lifetime. And if there are football fans around the world, they need to know the story of Pele and what he did. When some people say that Pele just played against weak teams, they don't consider what football was back then, and they also disrespect not just Pele, but a lot of clubs from all around the world that played against Santos or Brazil and are proud of that because that team marked a generation and a period in the history of football, just like Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo did in the last few years. Sadly, Pele is gone now. His funeral took place in the city of Santos, in Vila Belmiro Stadium, which is the Santos Football Club field, the place that revealed him and where he lived his greatest moments. Many people came from the entire world to say goodbye to Pele. During the procession in the city of Santos, many fans gathered in the streets to say the last goodbye to their idol. In the images we can see the importance he had for people. Pele took the name of the country and transformed Brazil into something respectable in the world, which was in football, and gave people something to be proud of their country. The Santos Football Club and Brazilian fans gave the world a masterclass on how to revere a king. If it was in the arms of the people that Pele became a legend, it was in the arms of the people that he said goodbye.